Art thou ready to get thine psyche on? I like it.
Today we're going to be talking about humanistic psychology, which I love. I think it's what really sort of got me interested in psychology when I started studying it. And it's a psychological approach that emphasises the uniqueness of human beings. It is concerned with the subjective experience and human values of humans. So, unlike behaviourism, it actually cared what the person would report they were experiencing when they made that behaviour. Abraham Maslow is very well known for his role in humanistic psychology, but at the time it wasn't a fully formed approach, and he sort of first stumbled upon it when he was looking at the needs and motivations of humans. And in his book, Towards the Psychology of Being, he very excitedly describes his movement towards this approach, which I don't think he fully understood where he was going at the time. There is now emerging over the horizon a new conception of human sickness and human health, a psychology that I find so thrilling and so full of wonderful possibilities that I yield to the temptation to present it publicly even before it is checked and confirmed, and before it can be called reliable scientific knowledge.
Ooh, ambitious.
Yeah, I mean, Maslow was a scientist and he was a behaviourist, so for him to say that is pretty...
Yeah, he must have been really excited.
enthusiastic.
Yeah, definitely. Maslow himself was dissatisfied with the two leading approaches at the time, behaviourism and psychodynamic theory, psychoanalytic theory. The humanistic psychology emerged in the early 20th century, so again sort of at the same time as Watson's and Freud's ideas, and it was termed the third force in psychology by Maslow himself, and the key figures were Abraham Maslow, Carl Rogers and Clark Moustakas.
So we have briefly touched on this before, but the basic limitations of behaviourism and psychoanalysis was that psychoanalysis had quite a negative focus. It sort of saw everything in terms of conflict, the
Thanatos.
So yeah, with psychoanalysis it had quite a negative focus, with the Thanatos drive and all the conflicts that went on during development. And behaviourism denied many qualities that seemed inherent in our human experience, and so that was rejected by a lot of people.
Yeah. Carl Rogers was one of the first to adopt the approach, and his focus, in contrast to Freud's, was on the developmental processes that led to healthier and more creative functioning. It was Rogers who coined the term actualising tendency, and there's quite a bit of evidence for actualisation. The idea of self-actualisation is, as a human drive, seems natural to us now, but this needs to be contrasted to the views of the time. So you had the Freud's drive for destruction, and Skinner in behaviourism said there were no drives, just stimulus and response, creating conditioning. Like Freud, Carl's work was built on experience with emotionally troubled people, but rather than focusing on their troubles, Rogers was more interested in their progression in the direction of growth and positive change, and came to believe that if the course was clear, people would always choose growth over regression.
And this led to the development of Rogers' person-centred therapy, and this is an approach that's still widely adopted today, in which the therapist just acts as a sounding board from which the individual can explore their problems and how they feel about the problems, without sort of the therapist putting their oar in too much and advising all the time. It's just literally just there to express. And it's very, with Rogers' person-centred therapy as well, one of the key concepts was that the therapist was to unconditionally love the patient, in that they'd accept whatever they had to say and not tell them that it was wrong to say any of these things, and just literally be there to be supportive no matter what they said. And that was quite different from a lot of other approaches at the time.
Mm.
You don't want to know about the mental health hospital at the time.
No, they were bad.
So like Freud, Roger focused on the self, but in a slightly different way. He saw the self as consisting of all the ideas, perceptions and values that characterise that individual. Part of that self is the perceived self, and this influences how the person perceives both the world and their own behaviours. The individual evaluates every experience in reference to this self-concept, And in this sense, Rogers believed that anxieties and pathologies stemmed from a gap between someone's self-concept and their experience. Rogers suggested that the best way for the self to reflect reality and thus not cause this anxiety with any gaps between reality and the self was to accept the self as flexible and not rigid, and something that changes and adapts to different situations. We've got the actual self, which is everything. We've got the perceived self, which is how the person sees themselves at the time.
And Rogers also introduced the ideal self. The closer one gets to the ideal self, the happier and more fulfilled they'll feel. He also believed in unconditional positive regard as a child, greatly assisting in the functionality of the adult mind. On the other hand, conditional regard can result in a child's distortion of their self-concept.
So if the child's only loved when they behave good, but that's not what their inherent self-concept is, that will cause them a great deal of trouble as they grow older.
Mm-hmm. This led Abraham Maslow to study self-actualization as one of the needs of humans,
which is sort of like the movement from the perceived self to the ideal self. That is the self-actualization drive. So
these ideas led Abraham Maslow to study self-actualization as one of the needs of humans. He moved away from behaviorism after the birth of his first child, stating that anyone who observes a baby cannot be a behaviorist.
Remember Watson?
Yeah, Watson and Little Albert, so it's a bit of a dig. He studied self-actualizers, which are people who've made extraordinary use of their potential, studying people such as Einstein, Eleanor Roosevelt, Abraham Lincoln, and this led him to list a set of characteristics which he put together in 1967. These characteristics include things like being able to perceive reality efficiently and tolerate uncertainty, being problem-centered rather than self-centered, highly creative, and capable of deep appreciation for the basic experiences in life.
He also identified several behaviours that were associated with these people, and that was that they experience life like a child. That's not in an id sense, that's in a full absorption and concentration sense, like when a child is fascinated by the rain. They try new things rather than sticking to old, safe and secure ways, and they listen to their own feelings to evaluate experience rather than the voice of authority or tradition, which is quite consistent with Kohlberg's theory of moral development, where the highest theory of moral development is the ability to evaluate what's right or wrong yourself without societal pressures telling you. There are a few other ones like assuming responsibility, but he basically argued that if you can strive for these qualities, you'll have a better, happier and more fulfilled life. And it's in stark contrast to the suggestions of Freud and behaviourism in how helpful they are to improving everyday life. I mean, Freud says how not to be sad, but he doesn't say how to be happy.
Yeah, definitely. Maslow also introduced the theory of human motivation, and he concluded that there are 5 sets of goals which motivate humans: basic needs, physiological needs, safety, love, esteem, and self-actualization. These goals are related to each other and arranged in a hierarchy of prepotency. So one has to be fulfilled before you can move on to the next level.
And this led to the somewhat sad conclusion that man is a perpetually wanting animal, meaning that as soon as one need is fulfilled, it will move on to the next.
Oh, gosh.
Also coincides with a lot of Buddhist teachings.
Yeah, definitely. And I'd say was definitely reflected in today's materialistic society.
Yeah.
100%.
So once you've got enough money to eat, you want enough money for a house, and then you want enough money for nice clothes, and then you want enough money for a boat, and then you want enough
money for a private jet, and it just goes on and on. Maslow believed that with only a few exceptions, all psychopathologies could be explained as the thwarting of these needs. So the absence of fulfillment breeds illness. Maslow's position, and that of many humanists, was largely influenced by existentialism, because experience dictates that identity and the experience of identity is crucial to human experience. The existentialist study of an authentic, non-pathological person and of authentic living helps throw light on real psychological health.
For example, Maslow, in his Towards a Psychology of Being, talks about the changes in cognition that occur during peak experiences, and the best way to describe these is as a sort of precursor to the concept of flow, which you may be more familiar with. But just to finish off humanistic psychology, we just want to outline the 5 basic principles that make it what it is today. The first one is that human beings as humans supersede the sum of their parts. They cannot be reduced to their counterparts. I.e., you cannot define a person by one action or one asset of their personality. They are more than that. They are more than the sum of their parts. You have to look at them
as a whole.
As a whole.
Yeah.
As a holistic approach.
Oh. The second is that human beings have their existence in a uniquely human context, as well as in a cosmic ecology. So humans live in nature, but have created a whole new experience outside of nature.
And so I think maybe the concept of anthropomorphism will come in here, in that because human beings have their existence in a uniquely human context, they can't help but explain things in the cosmic ecology in the terms of their human context.
Definitely.
The third principle is that human beings are aware and are aware of being aware. This could be some people's conception of consciousness, and it includes the consciousness that other people are conscious. A bit like the theory of mind, which we will discuss in a later video on developmental psychology.
Yeah, definitely. The fourth principle is that human beings have the ability to make choices and therefore have responsibility. So
it's quite contrasted to behaviourism.
Definitely, because behaviourism was simply, you see a stimulus, you make a response, whereas with this one it's giving back choice.
Even with Freud was endorsed psychic determinism. He would state that you didn't really have responsibility for the problems that you had today. They were more the responsibility of your parents and your upbringing. But the humanistic people were very focused on the present conditions as opposed to previous ones.
Yeah.
The fifth and final principle of humanistic psychology is that human beings are intentional. They aim at goals and they are aware that they can cause future events. They seek meaning, value, and have creativity.
It's quite a nice theory, really. Makes you feel good about yourself.
Yeah. So this is, I guess, precursor to the positive psychology, not positive as in empirical psychology, positive as in like yay feelings.
Yay feelings.
Positive psychology in that sense is just humanistic psychology rehashed for the modern day. I don't think one of the problems with humanistic psychology is it's not easily empirically supported. It's a bit like Freud in that it relies on case studies a little bit. And because of the vagueness of a lot of the hypotheses, it's difficult to prove or disprove. So a lot of these notions are still widely accepted today, but with little additional evidence in the last
It's sort of a pinch of salt approach, really.
Yeah. I think it's an optimistic approach.
Yeah.
And I don't think it does very much harm to adopt this approach.
No, definitely not.
But that is humanistic psychology.